Well, hello there. I'm Angela. It has been a while. I'm so happy to be back to filming. I talked about it on my Instagram, but a lot of people probably aren't over there. So, to reiterate, I have been in a really nice past few months of my life here where I've had some character plot development in my life, if we're talking about our lives in the ways of books. I joined an in-person book club in the summertime, and wouldn't you know it, that's a great way for you to meet people in your community. And so I have been, since the summer, actually being a part of my community and making friends and living the found family trope in real life. And it has been so gloriously wonderful. And I've put a lot of time and effort into forming those bonds and relationships. Now I am very eager to get back to my reading. I had a moment where I was looking at my bookshelves and I was going to the store to get things for Christmas, and I was struggling to get books because, again, like with my project Read the Room, I am just so eager to read the books on my shelves. So I'm gonna do a new video updating about Project Read the Room, and that will be coming soon. And that's going to be my goal for this year, is reading the books that I have. And because of my Cozy Corner cafe and bookshop game, I have read a decent amount of books on my shelves, and wouldn't you know it, a lot of them were fantastic and they were exactly what I had hoped that they would be. So a lot of them are in this stack. Took a while of deliberation, but I have my top 10 favorite books of the year. All right, so the book coming in number 10, these are all 5 stars, by the way, which is phenomenal. I think maybe one's like a 4.5, but either way, so many good books this year. And to start off in my top 10 favorite books of the year, my 10th slot goes to the master Carl Sagan, the genius Carl Sagan. And this book is called The Demon Haunted World: Science as a Candle in the Dark. So this book I refer to as my Bible. This is so unbelievably needed, especially now. I don't want to say especially now because this has always been needed, but especially in America, we have very rapidly, just with this new administration, thrown science out the window, thrown education out the window, thrown human decency out the window. And this is honestly so important and needed. This was written in the late 90s. I believe it was 1996. Technology was booming, everything was changing rapidly, and Carl Sagan wanted to write a book going across so many different genres. This goes through technology, it goes through aliens, it goes through witches and witch hunting in the past. It goes through politics, history, so many different subject matters. Oh, demons. It goes through a lot of these things, and he examines them through the lens of a science mind. Basically, the scientific method. Just because there is no proof that something doesn't exist doesn't mean that it does exist. And he does a lot of comparisons between science and pseudoscience. There is pseudoscience abound. There always has been. Again, a lot of it is very popular. He discusses how, even though it is so tempting to believe a lot of these things that you really want to believe, you cannot throw aside logic. You can't throw aside reason. You really need to not just do it for your own sake, but as a culture, as a society, there are things that will be taken advantage of. For example, politicians will take advantage of othering people. He talks about how imperative it is for us as a society to give everything we can to education. We really need to prioritize education. We need to prioritize scientific, reasonable, logical thinking. And if we don't, there are so many that are going to take advantage of that and do take advantage of that. If you want to talk about countries alone, even certain countries' religion and belief that there is life after, or the idea that you will get rewards in the afterlife if you suffered in this life. He gives perfect examples of how easy that makes a lot of people in power utilize people for dying in the military, utilize people to let them languish in poverty and not make changes, because if you just hang on, next life you'll have it. How people of authority will use that to quell revolutions, to get people to not rebel, to accept their place in life, because they have good coming to them in the future. But now the world can't be unjust because it will be just. Whereas a lot of us truly know that the world is very, very unjust, and the goal would be to make progress towards that. He talks about the Bill of Rights and how he talks about how important human rights are. And I'm focusing a lot on the political part because, again, living in America, it has been horrifying to just watch logic and science and compassion just be obliterated in such a short period of time. And so I really resonated with a lot that he talked about in this, about resisting that impulse to push other people out and make up false claims about their cultures, who they are, all of that. But there's so much more. A lot of this actually is about aliens, flying saucers, abductions. Carl Sagan was an expert in working with organizations in regards to these subjects, so he's had a lot of experience, a lot of inside knowledge. There's just so much in here. I have so many tabs talking about just logic. Logic. Honestly, I read so much of this book out loud because it was just so unbelievably refreshing to think about testable science and think reasonably about how we can't make assumptions. But he does talk about how imperfect science is. We have so far to go. I could keep talking about this book. I probably need to wrap it up. I've been talking about this book for quite a while, but it's just such a relief to read these words, to see my viewpoints of life reflected back to me. Even though this is from the 90s, we have had more progress since then, but it's still just, even the way he speaks about things, and especially history, it's just so refreshing and wonderful. I would recommend anybody to check this out because it really has such a wealth of information, and you could learn a lot, and it helps a lot. I thoroughly love starting my year off with this book. This one completely caught me off guard. Was not expecting this to be a 5-star, and then in my top 10. But I had so much fun with Talia Hibbert's book, Act Your Age, Eve Brown. This book was just a blast. I was squealing, kicking my feet. I loved these characters. This follows one of the Brown sisters. I think that there are 3 books for the 3 different sisters. And Eve is the sister who has all these different ideas, all these different job things that she's working towards, but then always falls through. She loves listening to music. She's a very creative, beautiful soul who is very vibrant, and she is struggling because her parents are saying, like, okay, you need to actually get a job. All of these jobs keep falling through. You need to get a job. You need to grow up. This is what they said. And she is struggling because it's not really her fault that she's like this. She just has a lot to give and care about. So it says, when her personal brand of chaos ruins an expensive wedding, that's when her parents draw the line, and she goes for a drive to clear her head. And as she's driving, she finds this wonderful little bed and breakfast in this small town, and there's a cook job open. So the person who would cook and bake for the bed and breakfast, through a comedy of errors and funny series of events, she ends up starting to work at this B&B with Jacob. Oh my gosh. So Jacob is this grumpy man who runs the B&B, but he is autistic, he's misunderstood, and he just kind of struggles to be friendly with people. It's really, really just very heartwarming, very funny. I laughed out loud a lot. I was squealing. It is adult. I will warn you. It does have some very descriptive sex scenes, but oh my god, they're so good. Like, this book was so fun, and I just loved too the exploration of autism and if Eve potentially is as well, and just feeling misunderstood, both of them, for so much of their life, and then potentially coming to a place where maybe people can see them for the good that they are and get to know them for the best versions that they can be. It was just so heartwarming to see Eve stumble and try to figure out how to cook in this B&B, which is like the ultimate cozy setting. This setting was wonderful. And Jacob having to get used to somebody who is not clear-cut, perfect, does things the way he wants to do, has vibrant lipstick, colors, music, all the stuff, which is not comfortable for him. So we've kind of got this frustrating relationship that turns into a softer, more understanding and loving relationship that I just squealed with the whole time. I had such a great time with this B&B and cooking and baking situation. It was fabulous. Okay, we're gonna go back to deep, upsetting territory after a brief break for the joy and loveliness of Actor Age Eve Brown. So this book I listened to on audiobook in one sitting, and it is A Mouthful of Dust by Nevo. This is the newest book in the Singing Hills cycle. They're short novellas. I absolutely recommend them. They all have such unique characters and writing. Thankfully, in the Top Shelf Society book club I used to be in, we got to actually interview Nevo. She came for us reading one of her books. And that book that we had read, the Great Gatsby retelling book that she had written, was so different from the Singing Hills cycle. Like, I just can't believe how talented of a writer Nevo is. I was so grateful I got to gush and fangirl to her and to say how much I adored her work. The Singing Hills cycle is no different, and this one really felt like a gut punch. It felt like a rock sitting in my stomach. And it is because this book is about famine. And the setup of the Singing Hills cycle is there is this cleric named Chi. They go around the Singing Hills and they collect stories from all of these different times in history, different people. And in this book, Cleric Chi is visiting a river town that experienced a very legendary famine. And it's called A Mouthful of Dust because they had made desserts out of dust. They had nothing else. And they discover what happens when hunger stalks the land and what the powerful will do to hide their crimes. This was very hard-hitting in general because of famines, and especially right now, it was heartbreakingly timely with the forced famine in Gaza, in Palestine. It's just absolutely frustrating and devastating, and it feels like you can't do anything about it because it is people with the power and with the wealth that are doing these things and causing these things to happen. And unfortunately, that is how they keep their power and their wealth. And this book was just so visceral in a lot of the writing. And it really, really was just, this is where I struggle to come up with words. All I could think about was Palestine. And that's not the only famine that is even currently happening. So really appreciate Nevo for tackling this subject in a historical fiction fantasy type way. And it is definitely a short story that it is also a horror, obviously. And you just feel this heaviness and this lurking feeling as you learn about this famine that Cleric Chi is writing down the tale of. There's something in the background that you know is there that you can't pinpoint exactly. So this one really, really just, I remember sitting there afterwards just staring into the distance, just letting it wash over me, and it was a great one. This was one of my favorites of the Singing Hills cycle. These next, I would say 3 books are pretty interchangeable in their placement because they're all just so good. So they're all in the middle. Another book, this one made me probably cry the most this year. I sobbed at this one. This is The Last Devil to Die by Richard Osman. This is the newest book in the Thursday Murder Club series. I talk about this series all the time. I would heavily encourage everyone to check out the Thursday Murder Club series. They are mysteries set in England, and they follow a group of elderly people who they're at this Cooper's Chase retirement home, and they have various jobs from their past that all help them be able to solve crimes, murders, cold case files. So on Thursdays, they get together and solve those. And in a lot of the books, a lot of them are not just cold cases. It also ends up happening in the present. And really, the police force is tired of them, but they love them too. The Thursday Murder Club series is just funny, cozy. Some of my favorite writing of characters, they're all so unique and individual, including all of the characters past just the main people in the Thursday Murder Club. You know the police officers, you know the people in the town, you know some other people at the retirement home. You get to know so many characters, and they're all so unique and very clear who they are. And he doesn't waste a lot of time. You can like instantly figure out this person, and you just know them and love them over time. I can't really tell you what the Last Devil That Die is about because I think it's the 4th book in the series. But I agree with this Washington Post quote: "The quartet of friends makes for delightful company." They're so funny, the most wonderful British humor, and it's really lovely to read characters that are later on in their life. Richard Osman has a really masterful way of addressing really serious and heavy topics, but yet somehow it still seems like a comforting book and very much an important life experience and story. This book made me sob because they do talk a lot in this book about some heavy life things that can and do happen frequently. And this book just ripped my heart out. I'm not gonna lie, this book, I would sob just thinking about what I had just read. And so this one is less lighthearted and fun, but it still is. It is so delicately handled, so beautifully handled, and it just makes my heart explode. And I always will keep recommending the Thursday Murder Club series. Then the next book is by my favorite author, Leigh Bardugo, and that would be The Familiar. I read The Familiar this year, finally. I was so eager to read it, and I have so many tabs. And obviously, it's in the middle of the list of my favorite books of the year. I absolutely loved The Familiar. Okay, first of all, what it's about. So this book is about magic. So it takes place during the Spanish Inquisition, and this character, Lucia, is in Spain, and she's hiding the fact that she is able to use little scraps of magic. Like, she can use magic. But the reason why she hides that is because she also is Jewish. And in the Spanish Inquisition, with also a king who, it was very tricky because, yeah, the magic would be wonderful and they would be really captivated by it, and you could gain wealth and you could gain notoriety, but also with the Inquisition, you could very easily be called a witch and be sentenced to death. It was such a fine line by whatever the church wanted. And so it was very, very dangerous. But Lucia ends up going to this competition with other people who can also use magic to try to gain the king's favor, to try to move up in life, because she's always been poor. She's always been alone and struggled other than with one family member left, really. The reason why this one destroyed me especially, first of all, Leigh Bardugo, same thing with Ninth House, is so good at adding like historical facts and making the tale seem really realistic and believable. But the thing that always destroys me with these books by like Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom, The Familiar, is there's also characters that you're just like, you're just squealing and dying. Really, like honestly, I I get so caught up in relationships and the way people interact with each other and the secret things that they're feeling and not saying, and I used to read a lot of fan fiction, let me put it that way. I really like depth in relationships and characters, and also longing and yearning and devastation. And so there is another character called Santon Hell. He is the scorpion here. He also has something to do with some magic, and he's kind of trying to help her succeed for reasons of his like master. He's become kind of enslaved to this family, and his master wants Lucia to win so that he can get all of these positions of power and wealth. And Santon Hall is like, it just reminds me of Kaz, honestly. Like, he's not Kaz. She did a good job differentiating them. But it just gave me those feelings of like this poor, traumatized, dark, brooding man who like can't have feelings but does also, and is confused by them. And where this goes by the end, like honestly, I almost couldn't finish the last chapter because I was just like, oh my god, I can tell where this is going and I don't know if I can handle it. I don't know how to do it. I think I did. I actually recorded myself reading the last thing, and it's in my video about, I did a whole dedicated video to this book. And yeah, I was crying. I couldn't breathe. I was like, oh, I felt like I had a weight on my chest. I really put myself in characters' shoes, and imagining where this went and being in their shoes, I struggled. I was on the struggle bus, but I love that. I love being on the struggle bus and just experiencing the most intense emotions when it comes to books. So I loved this. I especially loved the ending, and I was a mess. It was great. I read this book twice this year. This is a new favorite of mine, obviously, and that is Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu. Read this book twice, as I said. I'm obsessed. I love it. I don't have a lot to say about it because, like, it's just so good. I am always cautious when a male author writes from the perspective of women, especially young women, because it's such a very specific life to have lived and perspective to have that it is very rare that it's even possible you can do it justice. But I loved these characters, and I just think that this is a classic for a reason. It is the first vampire book, actually, and just sapphic vibes all the way. I love how much there is to such a short tale. It's like a few hours on an audiobook only, but you go through such a journey with such good writing. I would read things out loud constantly for how wonderfully written it was. I can't say too much because it's such a short story if you're not familiar with the story of Carmilla, but there's a young 19-year-old woman and her father. They live in this remote castle in Europe, and she's very, very lonely. And just so happens a carriage crashes nearby, and there's another young woman who they take in to help recover, and her name is Carmilla. But interestingly, the young girl has a memory of seeing Carmilla in her bedroom when she was a child. So she's very confused. She thinks she must have imagined it, and as Carmilla stays there, a lot of strange occurrences start to happen, and yet she's so fascinated with her, and they're fascinated by each other. Just read it. If you like vampires at all, read it. This is such a phenomenal one. Honestly, it's one of my favorites, and I am in awe of it. The one thing I want to give a caveat about is this edition. This is the edition edited by Carmen Maria Machado. I am torn because on the one hand, I recommend this edition because it has some of the most beautiful pieces of art in this edition. Okay? Gorgeous, stunning. It's so beautiful. However, I really don't appreciate Carmen Maria Machado's introduction because in the beginning, there's a foreword where she explains about how Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu's book Carmilla was actually stolen from women's letters that he supposedly found. I understand that she's using the trope of what happens in this book is, oh, you found letters, let's read it. That's a very common thing in these classic books, in Gothic books. But she never says that that is fiction. And it is fiction. She wrote that. A lot of her also footnotes are fiction as well. She wrote it, which is not a wrong thing to do. It's really fascinating and interesting imagining if that was true, but it's not, and she doesn't say that. So I have even ran into people in real life telling me, oh, hey, did you know that he didn't actually write this book? It came from letters. And I have to tell them, like, that's not true. She made that up. That was fiction. She was just playing with it. And I just find that quite irresponsible because a lot of people wouldn't go to the depths of having to research if that was true or not. And now you're taking credit from his work to say that he didn't do it. And then the other thing, which is very small, but that really, really annoys me, is that there are bats on the cover. And they're not bats that Carmilla turns into. It's not a vampire story where she turns into a bat. Like, so why are there bats? It was very strange. So if you get this edition, just keep in mind, that's not true. It's just fantasy. Just try to enjoy it as an interesting concept, but not truth. And that it's not about bats. So on a happier note, Carmilla, there's so much you can talk about in this. You can talk about if it was sapphic, if they did love each other, if she was just being a manipulative vampire. There's just so much to it. And I really would have loved to have read this when it came out. I think it came out in, let's see. Oh, it doesn't say. But I believe it was from the 1800s. And imagining reading this in the 1800s, because it is not subtle at all. And so I don't know, very interesting. And there's a lot of conversations to be had about that, about if he was trying to portray female-female love as bad, or if he was also giving it the light of day under that guise because you kind of have to talk about it. But for the people who appreciate it and are glad to see it represented, it would have that representation. So there's a lot of conversation to be had. So I would very much recommend reading this classic, especially if you like vampires. You have to read the original Carmilla. On the subject of vampires, it's a very popular thing for me. I really like vampires. Oh my god. A Long Time Dead by Samara Breger. Oh my god. This was a book and a half. It was so filled with so many fascinating things. I loved this book so much. This was another book that I read for my in-person book club. We are vampire fans there. And it is a sapphic story as well. Sapphic vampire stories, best of all. A Long Time Dead follows a young woman back in 1837, somewhere foggy, but you get the idea that it's London. And her name is Poppy. She was a lady of the night and all of a sudden wakes up and is in the predicament of having been turned into a vampire. Her first infuriating moment is realizing that she cannot eat anymore. And why on earth is that okay? And I just about cheered to the heavens because that is my number one issue with the thought of being a vampire. No food or drinks. What else is there to live for? Food is the best thing. And to see that in another character, I loved it. It is so funny, so well written. And you follow Poppy as she becomes a vampire, figures out that life, and is with a companion who doesn't want to be a vampire and doesn't like the situation and is not built for it. Whereas Poppy is quite built for being a vampire. Think like Lestat and Louis, kind of, you know? So her companion Roisin, they build a bond together, but then they get separated because she has this ultimate thing she has to take care of so that they can actually build a life together and be together safely. It reminds me a lot of Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab, which also has the same type of concept, to the point where I looked up if V.E. Schwab had referenced this, because this was written first. And it was so much like Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil that I'm like, did Victoria Schwab like get inspiration from this? Because this came first. So either way, I absolutely love it. I wrote all in this book everywhere. I just had an incredible time. This was from 2023. You get to meet so many characters from so many different walks of life with so many different personalities. And there is this overlying issue with Roisin, but then there's also Poppy and what she wants to do with her life. There's a lot of interesting hijinks that occur. It says, soon their little world explodes. Together and apart, they encounter scores of vampires, shifty pirates, conniving opera singers, ancient nobles, glamorous French women, and a found family that throws a very particular sort of party. But all around, threat looms. One woman capable of destroying everything Poppy and Roisin hold dear. The thing that I love the most about this book is, number one, the representation. This is such a diverse cast and very much goes in depth with a lot of these, especially queer experiences and lived experiences. I liked a lot of the ways that they talked about it, a lot of the ways that you get introduced to these characters. This book is such a found family book. It is such a great found family and a great romance. Roisin and Poppy have this romance that is just so intimate and caring and beautiful. One of the things that I love about this book so much, and I mean this in truly the greatest of compliments, is this felt like fan fiction. Let me explain why that's the best compliment in the world. People write fan fiction because the main movie or TV show that they're seeing this from, they need more. They want the day-to-day small things that wouldn't make it into a film or TV. Like, you want them making pancakes for breakfast. You want them laying next to each other in bed and talking. You want the daily moments that make you yearn, long, squeal, just be so happy, and including the sad moments, the hard moments of life. This book has that. You really feel like you're there with them. And you get to know all of these other people in the cast of characters, and you do have this overlying worry because there is a threat to them, but gosh, you just root for everything. You root for everything and everyone, and it was just such a wonderful experience. I like this quote from Gabrielle Korn. It says, "A gorgeously written lesbian vampire story that's as sexy as scary." It is quite sexy. Adult content warning. Samara Breger has taken a familiar narrative of bloodlust and immortality and made it wholly her own. I inhaled it. I inhaled it too. I do agree that this doesn't really feel like other books that I have read about vampires. It's just so much more, so much depth, so much life to it, which is ironic because they're living dead, but it's fantastic. We've made it to our top three. Our top three. You can probably guess quite a few of them, except for number one. Number one, you don't know about yet. Number three is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. And I'm so happy I got to see him this year. That was such a great capper for having read a 5-star book from him, because I loved Tress of the Emerald Sea. This he wrote kind of as if in The Princess Bride, if Princess Buttercup had rescued him and had her own agency. And that's what this book is, really. So Tress lives on the Emerald Sea. She just lives on this small island, and the Emerald Sea is made out of spores. And it's all over. She just longs for adventure. She collects teacups from sailors, from people that come to their small little island, until her best friend slash the man that she loves gets kidnapped and taken away. And she decides, she's such a practical lady. She's just like, well, his dad doesn't care about him. His dad's a rich, wealthy, powerful man, and he is not the son that he wants him to be. So if he gets kidnapped, oh, it's his dad's happy about that. So no one's gonna help him. So I have no other choice. I have to be the one to help him. She's so practical that way. And so she does. And she gets to a pirate ship, and you're on a ship in a sea of spores, and the spores can do a lot of things and explode, and it's just the funnest time. It is such a hilarious story. Again, found family. You get to know all these really interesting, diverse cast of characters that are all just such individuals. There's a theme. My favorite books and my favorite writing are found family and characters that are so unique that you can tell every single one. Like, you know them as people. They're not fake. They seem very real. If you want a swashbuckling, fun, crazy time, I would highly recommend Trust of the Emerald Sea. It's such a great journey. I loved every minute of it. Number 2, Welcome to the Hyeonamdong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-rim. This book is a warm hug. It really is. It's not just a warm hug. It's a warm hug and then somebody just like soothing you and brushing your head and your hair. That's this book. This book takes place, it's actually a Korean translation. So it does take place in Korea in a quaint neighborhood in Seoul. A woman opens up a bookshop called the Hyeonamdong Bookshop. And she and a lot of the characters in this are grappling with the idea of not living the stereotypical working class life that everyone tends to expect of them. And everybody going through their own unique paths and grappling with how hard that can be. We have Youngju, who is the burnt out woman who decides through some life changes that occur, it's time to open up her bookshop. You also follow a young man who's hired as a barista there at the bookshop, and then he goes and gets coffee and beans and learns how to be a really good barista from another woman who owns the coffee bean store. You have a mom and a young boy coming in, or a teenage boy coming into the bookshop, a writer. You just really get to see people living their lives in the ways that is working or what they need right now, as opposed to what society tells them to do. There is so much acceptance and comfort in this book. It really, really brings home also how wonderful books are. I do have to say, it's very wonderful to read a book about books. There's just something so special about these characters, about the bookshop, and I think it would be really, really wonderful, especially for somebody who either has taken a less than traveled path in society, or what people in your life have told you you should do and what the respectable thing is, or people who are interested in potentially doing that. This will leave you smiling and wanting coffee and a book. My number 1 book, I'm going to have a hard time talking about, and that's why it's my number 1 book. Oh man. The best book that I read this year, that I have read this is one of the best books I've ever read, is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. I mostly listened to The Reformatory on audiobook, and the narrator does a wonderful job in doing the voices for the different characters. And boy, oh boy, this is not an easy read at all. It's very, very much about some of the worst things and people that can and have been done. The Reformatory takes place in Florida in the 50s, which, as we know, was the Jim Crow South at the time. And it is based off of real things and even references real people and cases and things that occurred. So it's certainly not easy, but very, very necessary to read about and acknowledge and hold space for and come to terms that we have to still continue to have reparations for these things. So you follow a young brother and sister, Robbie and Gloria. Robbie is a 12-year-old boy, and they are both Black. They were kind of cornered by one of the white boys at the town, and he's the son of the white man who basically owns the town. And he was making passes at Gloria, and Robbie was trying to defend her and ends up kicking him. That ends up getting him sent to a school for boys called the Reformatory. The Reformatory, based off of real stories of other schools in history, is not very much a school. It is very much a place of forced labor, of abuse, of torture, anything you can think of. I'm sure you can immediately know, especially from history, what is done at these. And they claim that it's okay because they were the ones who were being punished, and they're just needing to whip them back into shape so they don't commit any more crimes. Which is absurd. These are young boys. Gloria, in her chapters, is working to get everyone involved that she possibly can to try to get Robbie out of this school, because she knows how bad it is there, and she knows that it is unjust and unfair what happened to him, and it needs to be changed. She needs to get him out. So it's talking about the legal elements of that. The thing about the Reformatory is that this is not just historical fiction. This is a horror book. The story, in the Reformatory, there are haints, which are essentially kind of like ghosts, and they can cause harm. And Robbie can see them. It says that Tananarive pieced together the life of the relative her family never spoke of, bringing his tragedy and those of so many others at the infamous Dozier School for Boys to light in this riveting novel. This is very much based off of real stories, and the haints are just an element in it that adds to something that Robbie needs to try to survive, and the real terror of seeing haints, ghosts, echoes of these boys who have died there and suffered there. Tananarive is somebody that I'm going to now need to read everything from. The way that she is able to put one sentence out there that really just hits you right in the gut and perfectly explains and summarizes what is going on, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what the character is observing about life. This happens so many times where I just am like, yeah, yep, exactly, right? You know, the way that she writes these characters, everyone is so real. And you've known people like this, or you are someone like this, or you've felt these things. Everything that happens in this book has happened many times over in history, and it is something that we want to look away from, and we cannot. We cannot. It is so incredibly important to read stories like this. It is so devastating, and it just fills you with this urge and passion to fix it, and you can't, you can do the best that you can do, and you should. The sense of horror and evil and injustice and unfairness, it chokes you. You're watching Robbie and these boys trying to figure out how to survive this place that is intent on not having that happen. Especially not the same if you do happen to be lucky enough to get out, which is rare. And then Gloria is, with her limited resources and abilities, trying to figure out how, through the legal system that is not made for them, to get him out and get the justice that he deserves. I was chopping vegetables to cook dinner, listening to this audiobook, and I had to step back because my tears were just falling in to the vegetables. It's that kind of a book. You're going to want to rage at the world and cry at the world every moment of it. And the best you can do is be a witness to these stories and this history and use that to try to make change. Ugh, so much so. Stephen Graham Jones says here this is the book of the decade. I tend to agree. This is one of my favorite books I have ever read, which is a strange thing to say because this is some of the worst things you can ever read and think about, but it is so vital and important and so unbelievably well written. I just am absolutely obsessed with the mastery of her writing. It's just so real, and I absolutely cannot explain how much in awe I am of the Reformatory, and I need to pick up more Tananarive. Best book of the year, book on my top books of all time. Hate it. Hate what it's about so much, but the mastery of this and the importance of this is just blows me away. Blows me away. So heavy. Such a talent. Such a piece of epic work here. Here we have, let's see if we can get them all, my top 10 best books of the year, all phenomenal 5 stars. I had such a good reading year this year. I loved it. I read 48 books, by the way. Wasn't my best because, as I said, the second half of the year I read very little. I was too focused on my own personal life and character growth, but it was wonderful. The books I read this year were great, and the fact that I have 10 that are basically all 5 stars alone is a heck of a reading year. Oh, I should give some honorable mentions to some other 5 stars of my all-time favorite books that I reread this year. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. That book is my chest cracked open and pulled my heart and soul out into a book. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Sobbing wreck. Absolutely love that book. One of my all-time favorites. And I also reread Bunny. That is also one of my favorite books of the year. That was the 3rd time rereading it in preparation for We Love You, Bunny, which I haven't read yet because I'm just so nervous about it. I'm so nervous. I love Bunny so much that I'm very scared about We Love You, Bunny, but I will be reading that this year. So much to look forward to. I would love to hear what your favorite book of the year was if you have one, and if you've read any of these, or if there's any of these that now I've got you interested in. That would make my day if I knew that I may have convinced you to read one of these books. So here is to the next reading year. I am going to be focusing a lot more on reading this year, and I very much look forward to it. Until then, I hope that your life is filled with good books and good people. Take care.